The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Friday, February 28th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. Later on tonight, I will be in South Carolina, joining Ari Melber of The Beat, MSNBC's coverage of the South Carolina election that's taking place tomorrow. So I'll be jumping on the road after this. I want to go over some polling out of South Carolina. Biden still has a formidable lead there. Biden is up by 16 points, or a real clear average. He's up by 12 points. Sanders is at 22.3, Steyer's at 13.7, Buttigieg at 9%, Warren, Klobuchar, and Gabbard down from there. It's going to be a tight squeeze. There is some possibility that the polling is shifting towards Bernie Sanders in South Carolina, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough for him to come out in a first place victory. A strong second place would be good for him. South Carolina is Biden territory, particularly because of the African-American vote and the pull that he has with the fact that he was President Obama's vice president for 8 years. But there's a shift that's happening, right? Yesterday, I was getting some work done on my car, and I was walking across the parking lot of a mall back to the car dealership. And this guy saw me, some random guy I've never met in my life. He stopped me and he said, he was an older man too. And he stopped me and he said that he recognized me. And then I was like, yeah, I kind of played it off. I'm like, yeah, I've got a familiar face. He said, no, you're from YouTube. I was like, oh, here we go. Excuse my language. I'll bleep that out. And he was like, he said, I like what you all were saying about Bernie. I think I'll give him a second look. And I was like, wow, that matters. That's important. And I think while we may not have had a big enough effect before South Carolina, and we won't know until tomorrow. We'll see how the turnout is, and we'll see what the percentages are, and we'll get the results, right? But I think if we just continue to have the conversation about policy, the most powerful thing about the video that we put out is that everyone put their support for Sanders in terms of policy, because it is a policy driven campaign. It is a policy driven primary where we really are having substantive conversations, not on all the topics. Like there's not much that's been said about climate change, at least in the last debate, but on the topics that we get to, at least I feel like we are able to dissect the philosophical divide in the Democratic Party right now. I think while the debates themselves devolve into shouting matches that are good for entertainment for television, on the internet, we are having substantive differences about policy, and not everyone is engaging in good faith, right? There's some people who are engaging in bad faith. They're disingenuous with their engagement. But we're seeing people have actual policy discussions, and I think that's different than years before. Years before, I think it was more centered around personality. But I think this has become a great opportunity for us to really promote progressive policies. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing in the national conversation. And I think that's why we see an uptick in the polling for Sanders, even in the African-American community. He's edged out Joe Biden in the African-American vote. So the tide is turning. We'll see if it has turned enough tomorrow. And we'll take it from there. Another thing that's happening is a regular conversation that's being had about the delegate rules, the super delegate rules. And if a candidate doesn't hit the plurality, or rather the majority, if he doesn't hit 50+1%, then that triggers the ability of super delegates to go wherever they want to go and support who they want to support, and triggers a strong possibility of a brokered convention. What's happening now is that you have candidates who are refusing to get out of the race in order to make sure that happens, right? They won't release their delegates to ensure that we go into a brokered convention with the hopes of one of them becoming the nominee through a brokered convention. Now, I have one strong stance on this. I'm actually considering a second stance that was offered to me. But the first stance is the one that I've been standing on the entire time. Try it. Try us. Play around and see what happens if you steal democracy from right underneath our feet, right? If you rip democracy from underneath us like a rug, then we will demonstrate to you our democratic right to not vote for any of you. That's my initial reaction, right? Because I think there is no way that we would possibly reward the Democratic Party from snatching a progressive future away from us in order to preserve their political power. There's no way we reward them with our votes. And so we're preemptively letting them know that this will be the complete destruction of the Democratic Party for a generation, if not more, if not permanently. They will go the way of the Whigs. This is not something that they want to do. And this is just not me talking. Listen to this clip from Chris Hayes. And I believe the gentleman who's speaking is a former campaign manager for, I think it's David Plouffe. Let me check. Yep, that's him. Take a listen into Chris Hayes and David Plouffe as they discuss this very thing.
Yeah, it's possible that we're going to have somebody who doesn't have a majority of the pledged delegates. I believe that whoever is the plurality leader, unless literally it's a delegate or two, right. But even if somebody has a 50 to 100, we're really going to take the nomination away from them in Milwaukee? I'm not sure the party recovers that for decades.
I completely agree with that, right? That, like, if you go into the convention with a plurality lead, the idea of that convention being like, sorry, like,
thanks for playing.
Yeah, thanks for playing.
And,
we're just going to.
And the party bosses have decided the person who got the most delegates is now not going to be the nominee. Like, parties don't recover from that for a long time.
If they recover at all. My contention is that you will not recover at all. This is not something that you could play around with. Now, someone else came up to me and said, and made it clear that there's a way that we can approach this that does not necessarily involve destroying the Democratic Party. Okay. We'll take into consideration. They want us to begin lobbying the various superdelegates to gather a list and to make our case directly to the superdelegates. And they said that they would pass along some, they could help us make it happen. So here's the thing. I can do that. We can do that and we can organize around that. But I think I just want to make sure that I'm in my personal right lane. Right. I think the positive argument of you need to vote for basically before I finish explaining the second strategy, let me play the clip of Bernie Sanders from 2016 as he makes it clear that he's not in favor of the Democratic rules the way they were written. Even in 2016, what he believes is that superdelegates from states that a candidate won the majority of the vote should be allocated to that candidate. Listen to this real quick.
There's been a report that you might go to the convention and if you're behind in delegates, try to flip those superdelegates to win through using the superdelegates. Is that a strategy you are looking at?
The whole concept of superdelegates is problematic. But I would say that in states where we have won, by 20, 25 points, you know what? I think it might be a good idea for superdelegates to listen to the people in their own state. I just talked to a person the other day who said, you know what? I am going to listen to my state. And if my state votes for you, Bernie, you're going to have my vote. I think that I would hope that a lot of the superdelegates take that factor into consideration.
So, yes, that is a strategy you're pursuing.
Well, to say to a superdelegate, Bernie Sanders won your state by 20 or 30 points, you might want to listen to your state. I think that is common sense, and I think superdelegates should do that.
But if they didn't come from a state that you won, they shouldn't feel compelled to go for you. Well,
legally they have their own decision to be made. They have their own right to make that decision.
Right, exactly. This is the case. They have the ability to make that decision, but when they have won, I mean, the problem with superdelegates is the fact that they have the ability to ignore democracy. They have the authority inside of the Democratic Party to ignore the will of the people of their state. If the state overwhelmingly voted for Bernard Sanders, then it only makes sense that the superdelegates would go to them. Now, I played that clip because I wanted to give it to you in context of the second recommendation that someone gave me. Well, the first one wasn't a recommendation. The first one is what we're going to do. What we're going to do is if they play around and take democracy from us, we're going to make sure that the Democratic Party is no longer a party. And in fact, I feel no qualms about that because they're doing it to themselves, right? This is that you cannot publicly plan a coup. I don't even care. Like, a lot of people are saying, oh, these are their rules. These are their rules. If the rules are being used in a method to manipulate the will of the people, to snatch away the plurality, right? And then give it to somebody like Michael Bloomberg. How do you take the superdelegates? Riddle me this. How do you take the superdelegates and use that as a method of giving the nomination to a person who did not get as much or as many votes, rather, as the person who got the plurality? And how do you start planning that in advance, right? I know we go through this every 4 years, and this is a part of the game. And so people should know the rules and be able to work within the rules. Fine. And this is why I kind of put this next recommendation at the feet of Bernie Sanders' camp. Right. I put this. The recommendation was made to me that we begin lobbying the superdelegates, that we begin to petition them, that we begin to let them know, how we feel, blah, 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 blah. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I don't know that it's my job to do. It's not my job to say, hey, superdelegates, you need to vote for Bernie Sanders. Right. My job is to let them know, listen, if you take democracy from us, you could be a super delegate of a party of 5 people, right? And that's what you're going to do to yourselves. Taking democracy from us is not a bridge that you want to cross. It's a bridge too far. I feel like that's my job. Now, maybe you as an audience member, maybe you want to take the positive, the affirmation, the positive side of the argument, the affirmative side of it, where you're going to actively go and petition them to support Bernie Sanders. But I feel like that's the job of the team that's getting paid to do that, right? No, that's Bernie Sanders, a team. They probably have it structured. I'm confident. I'm not just saying this in terms of ponying it off to them. I'm confident that that's what they're already doing. They better be doing that, right? Let us rabble rousers outside of the system. Let us stir things up and let them know the consequences that will come if they strip democracy from us. And then let Sanders' team and the surrogates and all the people, let them court the superdelegates in the way they should, right? It's all part of the system. It's all part of the game. All right, so much more coming up. But first, let's have a little patron party.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Here we go. I want to see you dancing, ladies and gentlemen, and non-gender conforming individuals. Let me see you bop. It's a patron party. Very special thank you to Anand Malik. Thank you for becoming a patron. Rar-Meme. Thank you for becoming a patron. Gothic. Thank you for becoming a patron. Aaron Dowd, Angela Aldos, Laura Moza, Jamay, Althena, Zai Alexander, CJGD. I'm sorry, that's CJCGJD. I'm a little dyslexic at times. Very special welcome to Kelly Burns, Charles, Tanya Douglas, Vladimir Zikov, Scott DM. Very special welcome to Brian, Simon Abramovitz. There we go. Very special thank you to Jersey Memes. Very special thank you to Lee Fulmer, Brad White, Rebecca Salzberg, Newman. Very special welcome to Brian Connors, Elias Alter, Dick Ward, Walter Wilfinger, Benjamin Mayer Pratt, Petros K, Christopher Pearson, Sherry Baskin, Shajra Sponzo, Patrick Goggins, Kiri Rains, and Meet a White 1993 Camry. Thank you for becoming a patron. You all are getting more and more creative with your names every single day. I love it. Very special welcome. We got a lot more to go. Sam Opal, Smackalope, Lucy Lee, Fonda Conley, Trent Coleman, Oren J, Bill Cook, Jonathan Magnan, Celeste Bennett, Marcus Carbine, Larry Bragger, Nabil Vines, Venice, Alex Talk, Meet Blank. Thank you for becoming a patron. Seriously. Booga. You wanted to hear me say that on air. Thank you for becoming a patron. Anthony Suarez, Margaret Escobar, Charlene Farrell, Justin Cole, Sunless, Valentine N, Nwanzi, Hannah Shalev, Rocky C, Aaron Schumann, John Gold, Lewis Edenton. Very special welcome to Tim Lyons. The music is over, but the party keeps going. Nazim Uden, Christopher Davis, Jennifer T, Ken Schmidt, Kathy Norman, Sam Franks, Robin Harris, Argenis, Nora Brunell, Jamal Jackson, Joel Mayer, Irreverent Gunn. Welcome, Ted Delphus, DJG, Samantha Suave, X Zamillo. You all really just want to hear me struggle. X Zamillo. Okay. Edmund Gray, David Albert, Laura, Vivek N, and James Christensen. I finally got through them all. Thank you all for being patrons. Thank you for your support. Thank you for showing me how much this show means to you and making me believe in the show even more. And for all of you who can't become patrons, thank you for being willing to listen to advertisements like you're going to hear now. Okay, let's keep going with the show. Thank you so much again for all the patrons and everyone who listens to the advertisements. Don't forget, you get twice as much show with none of the advertisements if you go to patreon.com/the BPD show. I want you to listen to this next clip. Take a listen to this and then we'll discuss.
What I want to say to Democratic voters is that I think that it is unfair that the burden of electability always falls on marginalized communities, and that we can't say, for instance, if I do not stand for Bloomberg and I say to the Democratic Party that I expect more than an apology, because it's not stop and frisk, for instance, is not just a policy, it has bodies attached to it. And you would like me to overlook that,
right?
To vote blue no matter who, which my people have historically done, election after election. I think marginalized communities have been fighting injustice that preceded Trump for very many centuries.
Wow. That was a young lady who was on Ari Melber's show, I believe last night, and the clip was circulating on Twitter. I think it's important to put proper context, even more context. Not that we have to justify. I don't think that we have to justify the opposition that we're going to give the Democratic Party if they pull some stunt and make really anyone from a contested conventions are a non-starter. Period. Point blank. End of discussion. This is not back in the day when people didn't pay attention and lo and behold, something amazing happened at the 1949 Democratic National Convention. I'm just throwing the date out there. I probably could Google and get the exact date of the last contested convention for this example, but I'm not. Okay. Something interesting happened at the 1949 Democratic Convention where the perceived candidate, the presumed nominee, did not get the nomination. And then people are listening to that on the radio because, right, they didn't have televisions. They listen to it on the radio and they're like, that sounds like high drama. This is very interesting. But then they go to work and then they just vote for whoever showed up at whoever's name was on the ballot. Right? You could get away with that in the past. The long story short is that you could get away with that in the past. We are too invested in the political process, perhaps to our detriment, but we are entirely too engaged for you to consider doing that. That would destroy, you would not survive. Now, I don't feel like I have to give a justification for that because it's self-evident. And enough people are saying it I'm sure that was sorry, kids. That was MSNBC, right? Two of the best arguments we've heard against Bloomberg as well as a contested convention has come from MSNBC. And if that has made it to MSNBC, then the conversation across everywhere else is far more radical than what they're talking about on MSNBC. Long story short, if MSNBC has a problem with you trying to steal this nomination by usage of the superdelegates in a contested convention, you should know you're in trouble. You should know that this is the end of the road for you, that crossing this bridge is a bridge too far. Now, I repeated all that to say that I don't have to give a justification for our opposition against a contested convention or our opposition against Michael Bloomberg. But this young lady that we just listened to gave a perfect example of what the problem is. That we as African Americans and black people in this country, and there's two aspects of it. I'm going to talk about the race component first. There's three aspects of it. First, the racial component, you expect us to overlook the bodies. I wonder what the body count. I wonder how many young men ended up getting killed because of stop and frisk. We haven't had that analysis yet. It's going to be hard to determine how many people were stopped erroneously simply because of this racist policy, and it escalated into something where the black young man was killed. So they're not only bodies that were thrown up against the wall and sent on their way for the rest of their lives, but they're also bodies in the sense that I guarantee you this led to the death of some people. I mean, one of the best examples and terrible examples is probably the right adjective is Eric Gardner. The cops thinking that they had just the free will authority to just to accost this man on the streets for nothing, simply because they had a culture of stopping and frisking. So there are literal bodies attached to this policy. Bodies that were thrown up against the wall, as well as bodies that were murdered by the police. So there's a racial component, and now the Democratic Party is asking us. The Democratic Party is asking black people to be okay with someone who is complicit, not complicit. He is the architect of our oppression in New York City. He is the person who took the plans from Rudy Giuliani and turned that into an entire institution. And you want us to vote blue no matter who? You've lost every sense of grounding in reality that you ever had. That's number one. Number two, the class component of this. This is why it's like I really kind of take a step back and I think that the universe conspired to get that video to me specifically, because I am specifically the person equipped to knock this man across his political head on all aspects, both the race, the class, as well as governing philosophy, which is number three. I'll get to that in a minute. The class component involved in this is that he's sending in the military. He's sending in the force of the government. He's sending in the police into impoverished communities, and he's using the force of government through taxation to punish poor people. So you're not only asking us to vote for a racist, you're asking us to vote for someone who's literally the ruling elite who has a condescending gaze down towards us poor people, the unwashed masses. Really? Again, I don't have to justify if we simply just don't want to vote for this man or vote for a party that would steal democracy from us. That's our prerogative. But if you need to understand the justification behind it, listen to what that young woman said in context of race, and it is applicable to class as well. Last but not least, I don't vote for authoritarians. Michael Bloomberg is an authoritarian. He uses the power of the government instead of using it for good to address the underlying conditions that cause violence, which is poverty, and the other that cause specifically crime in general, right? It is poverty. And in terms of the sugar tax, if you think impoverished people need some help living their life better, then help eradicate poverty, you fatuous. I can't say fatuous tool anymore without thinking of my two friends who called me out, Lefty Uno and Adriel Hampton. I want to call this man a fatuous tool. It's my very best insult that's not profanity laden. It's difficult. It's difficult for me to insult people without some profanity. I mean, so if you want that, just come on over to the Patrons episode. Let the music keep playing at the end. Go to patreon.com and I can say what's really on my mind. I'm really trying my best, Grandma. I'm trying best for that elderly woman who said she would share my content if I just didn't cuss so much. I'm working on it. Y'all pray Jesus, pray baby Jesus over me. I'll get it right. But the bottom line is I'm not voting for any damn oligarch who is an authoritarian. Somebody who's his approach to poor people and his approach to minorities, both class and race, he's like the worst. He is the absolute worst. So to hear the Democratic Party talking about this is it's not only a non-starter, it's something that we just have to continuously organize around. And it is so bad, it is so appalling that even mainstream media has or at least MSNBC, they're rejecting this. Good luck with that, Democrats. You really you better think twice about it. Now, listen, if you want to, like I said in the last segment, if you want to politely lobby. I don't think, see, there's a difference. Like, you're going to have a lot of people who get hold of the names of the superdelegates, and it's going to turn into some harassment because you're passionate, right? I'm not knocking your motivations. I'm just saying it's inevitable to turn into harassment because we're passionate. So that's another reason I don't want to be directly involved in trying to discuss things with superdelegates, right? Because it comes down 100% to their prerogative. And if you turn them off, then they can use their prerogative just to spite that one Twitter user who said the right thing that irritated them. Right now, this is the case where your one thing that you say that could be misconstrued would easily be used against your best interest. So I don't know if having a campaign where we quote unquote lobby, I don't know if that plays out well in social media. I think that no. Let me just be affirmative. Let me just be sure. It will not play out well in social media at all. But what we can do is we can certainly just speak our piece in terms of how bad, and bad doesn't capture it, how utterly destructive it would be for them to steal democracy from underneath us. Okay, one last thing for this portion of the show. There's going to be an entire, an additional half hour of content for patrons past the closing music. Patreon.com/the BPD show. I am going to start organizing our first patron party live, or a live show in general, because we crossed the 1,000 threshold and we blew past all of our goals so quickly over the last 2 weeks. I'm not even in a position to do the things that I promised, but I do want to have a party. That's just what I like to do. I grew up in South Florida, Miami. Come on, from Miami, Fort Lauderdale. That's all we did was party. So we are going to have a live show, but it's going to be more of a live party. Like, we're not going to sit around and just complain about politics and talk about politics. Like, we'll do that for a few, but we will have music and we'll have dancing. It'll be a party. That's all I can tell you. And it'll be here in Atlanta. The first one will be here in Atlanta, and then we'll go to a city near you. Patreon.com/the BPD show. Last thing that I want to talk about is something that I had a chance to talk about on the Current Affairs podcast yesterday. I don't know when they're going to drop it. Whenever they do, absolutely check it out. It was a great conversation. Here's what's fascinating. I kind of put it in context on the show before, but I want to bring it back up. Two things. The lengths to which the Democratic Party will go, and I'm not talking about the establishment. I'm talking about just the, rank and file members and people at home who watch MSNBC, how far they would go in order to defeat Trump. In order to defeat Trump, they're willing to sell their souls. Like, I get if you're willing to bend the rules. I get if you're willing to play hardball. I get if you're willing to use dark money, whatever, to stop Trump. I get all that. I do believe Donald Trump is a unique threat to our democracy. I just don't know that no. Let me say it more confidently. I know without a shadow of a doubt that if we have to sell our souls to beat Donald Trump, then he wins. Right? And I'm not just talking about on some figurative stuff. If we sell our party to a Republican oligarch who is a neoconservative on foreign policy. Did you hear Michael Bloomberg's foreign policy position? Did you hear him talking about 9/11 as if we have not just waged 2 wars, and even more than that, over the last 2 decades, 20 years of violence as a result of 9/11 and a propaganda campaign from the Bush administration, and yet Michael Bloomberg is still stuck at 9/11. In terms of justifying the war on terror that has been an abysmal failure. Not only a failure, but has cost the lives of millions of people. Michael Bloomberg is a war hawk, a neoconservative. So the Democratic Party, in order to get rid of Donald Trump, they're willing to sell out their economic policy. They're willing to sell out, and I'm talking about like the rank and file as well as the establishment. But I want to kind of separate between the two, because I think the establishment, while they may not be comfortable with, getting someone in there who's willing to cut Social Security, they're more interested in maintaining their power. which they can maintain even if Donald Trump gets reelected. That's the purpose of this conversation, is you have people at home who are so desperate to get rid of Donald Trump because everyone has told them that they should be afraid of Donald Trump, which to a certain degree we should be. We got to get rid of that man. But to what extent? Like, at what cost? To sell our souls so that the Democratic Party becomes like, it was hard enough to tell the difference between Democrats and Republicans, but now you're actually going to bring in a Republican racist oligarch who's a warmonger who wants to cut Social Security and put him at the top of the Democratic Party ticket. And the Democratic establishment, they're like, so long as we maintain our power, that's cool with them. And Michael Bloomberg is like, so long as I don't have to pay Elizabeth Warren or Benjamin Dixon. Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders' wealth tax, it's cool with him if he loses to Donald Trump, so long as he stops Warren. Like, is this where we are? And then the second thing that I discussed on the Current Affairs podcast is how quickly here's the question. How long have you been a fan of Michael Bloomberg? How long have any of these people been a fan of Michael Bloomberg? Such that they are willing to make excuses for him, for all of his bigotry, for all of his lies, for all of his wrongdoing in New York, his stop and frisk, the soda tax, for his authoritarianism, for his racism. Like, how long have you been a fan of his? So long that you can't possibly find it in yourself to criticize him? Because I've been a fan of Bernie Sanders since 2015, and I still find it in myself to criticize him when it's time to criticize him, right? I can get, and I use this exact example, I could see if we're talking about Beyonce and you've been a fan of Beyonce since 98, say my name, if no one is around you, right? Of course you're going to make excuses for somebody who you believe in that much and you have been supporting them that long. But what's fascinating to me is that you people probably haven't even known Mayor Bloomberg existed for more than 3 months. You are at a stage of your fandom with Mayor Bloomberg that you're making excuses for him. And 3 months ago, you didn't even know who he was. And how is that possible? That's possible. It's made possible and brought to you in part by $500 million in propaganda and commercials.
Hey Ben, this is Sage from Seattle. I guess someone on the line for you who wants to talk to you. He's I think he's a little angry about some of the stuff you said, but anyway, here he is. Hey Ben, it's Mike from New York, obviously.
Mike Bloomberg.
I have a little song for you. I think it'll change your mind from some of all the bad things you said about me. So here we go. Come with me and you'll be in a world of billions of dollars. Take a look and you'll see what you can get for billions of dollars. We'll begin with a spin as I try to purchase an election. How I'll fare will defy explanation.
Let's go do the key change.
If you want to view my influence, turn the TV on and view it.
This is good.
Anything I want, I'll do it.
Oh, you missed the key.
Want to rule the world. There's nothing to it. There is no bribe I know that I can't make with billions of dollars. No matter what, I'll skate free if I truly wish to be. Goodbye, Ben. See you in 2024.
Pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT.
Okay, that was okay. I decided to play that because that is literally one of my favorite songs of all time. The song from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Literally one of my favorite songs of all time. And I don't know about the impersonation of Michael Bloomberg that he did. It sounds more like an Irishman than a New Yorker. But what do I know? I mean, maybe there's a strong Irish tint to the New Yorker accent. I don't know. But it was great. Thank you for that. Listen, coming up in the bonus show, the full episode for patrons, www.patreon.com/the BPD show. Become a patron for as little as $3 a month. I will be playing some more voicemails. I've got quite a few voicemails this week. We'll discuss that. We'll talk about them. And then 2, I want to give you a little bit of my background, my origin story. I can fill in some of the blanks. It's surprising that, you just kind of assume people kind of know how long you've been working at this. But I've been working at this for 10 years now. 10 years. So when people say there's no such thing as overnight success, well, hell, we're not even successful yet. I still need more patrons before I can consider myself successful. But the fact that we have been able to have impact, that's the thing. Like, I am grateful to be able to impact the conversation. That is success to me. And that has been 10 years in the making. And I want to tell you a little bit about that in the patrons episode that's coming up after this music. So patrons, stay tuned for about 15 more seconds and we'll continue the conversation with voicemails as well as my origin story and a little more politics to everyone else. Have a blessed weekend. I will see you. You can see me tonight on MSNBC unless something changes. I'll be in South Carolina this weekend, and then I will see you back for the podcast on Monday. Take care. Love you all. Bye-bye.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.